Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can hear all of our episodes over on DogWorksRadio.com. Be sure to check us out over on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. Today, we're joined by a couple of organizers of a brand new sled dog race called the Klondike Dog Derby in Minnesota. We're going to welcome today Bethany Hway and Jake Hway. How are you guys doing today?
Really good.
Doing great. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much for joining us. Bethany, can you do us a favor and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Absolutely. My name is Bethany, and I grew up in the sport, dog mushing. My dad raced competitively from the time before I was born all the way until I left home for college. And actually, Jake was a neighbor and started working in our kennel. I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that. And I eventually married his brother, so Jake is my brother-in-law. And I ended up kind of staying in love with the sport, I guess, but not having a great way of being involved in it, living down in the Twin Cities. And so I had the thought of bringing a sled dog race to my neck of the woods, which is where the concept for the Klondike came from.
Excellent. And Jake, I know you've been on the show before, maybe a couple of times, I guess it has been. Can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
So, yeah, my name is Jake Hway. I've been mushing for the past 20 years in Ely, Minnesota. I operate a tour kennel here called Chili Dog Sled Dog Trips, and then we've been having a lot of fun getting this new race going. Beth kind of dreamed it up a couple of years ago, and we had a lot of fun with that thing. It kind of took over like a whole new thing. There was so much energy around it, so I'm just real excited about that.
I am excited to hear about some of the planning and logistics of organizing a new race. A couple of weeks ago, we had on the Otter Run Kennel family, and they talked about heading to your race and sort of the upspring of the sport in the Midwest. I think that's something that we really need, along with the bear grease and a couple of old standbys. It's been a long time since a big sled dog race has been going on in that neck of the woods. So, Bethany, you said that you are sort of the organizer or the founder of this race. What was the concept behind it, and what were the first thoughts going into this? When did that start, and when did the wheels get turning?
So it would have been 2 years ago in January. My father is a race marshal at the John Bear Grease Sled Dog Marathon, as well as some other races in the Midwest. And I was not able to be there that year, but I was watching a live stream of it. Actually, Jake was there, I believe. And I essentially kind of had that itch. I know you hear from a lot of mushers, right, that you never really are able to retire from the sport. It kind of stays in your blood. And that's what happened for me. And I have an office that looks out over Lake Minnetonka, which is a huge lake. And in that moment, it was kind of this inspiration of like, man, it would be very difficult to bring a race here on land because of trails, and obviously being in an urban environment would be nearly impossible. But I thought, gosh, we could potentially do a lake race. And so that kind of was the spark of inspiration. And I started talking to some people, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
And here we are. And Jake, you reached out to me after the race, and you said that the turnout was phenomenal. There was all kinds of buzz online. I know that you are one of the moderators for one of the more popular dog mushing groups on Facebook. What was your role involved with this race, and how in the world did it take off like it did?
Well, it took off like it did mostly because of the area that it's in. It's in a very popular area, a very populous area. Very, it's in the Twin Cities, basically. And so there's so many people around there, and there's so many. There's plenty of people to fund it. There's a lot of sponsors willing to get involved, so they got advertised well. And but yeah, it was an incredible turnout. They say there was about 20,000 people that were involved in spectating in one way or another, whether that's being there at the start, viewing from around the lake, or watching the live stream online, which was about 5,000 of the 20,000. And so there was quite a bit going on for the first year of that race, and it was just really a fun vibe to see and be a part of. There's just such a positive energy coming out of everyone. The dogs are always full of positive energy, but the spectators, a lot of people had never been to any kind of dog sledding event before, and then they came to this thing, and they just got inspired and amped up because of watching the dogs and hearing the commentary, which was kind of myself and others. I ended up recruiting Blair Braverman to take over with me. We kind of took over the mic and ended up talking a lot about all the different aspects of the lifestyle, and we just had a ton of fun. And the people, the vibe just was awesome the whole day. There was no negative anything. So many people were just so excited and getting to see this thing. And cool part about the race was it did 2 loops on the lake, which wasn't the original plan, but that ended up how it needed to work, and which isn't ideal in the dog sled racing, but it was cool because then the spectators really got to see a whole lot of it because they came around again, and so everyone went out to watch the teams go around on the lake again before coming in for the finish. So there was just so much positivity and just a ton of fun.
That's awesome. And Bethany, first off, I have to commend you for getting behind this and help organize a brand new race. I think this is what our sport needs more than anything. Jake, when you said, Jake or Bethany here, when you said 20,000 people, spectators were there and, sort of a part of this, that's what this sport needs as well. That's on par with Iditarod or Fur-Rondy or any of the big sprint mushing races in Europe. That is an amazing turnout. And when I heard that, the first thing that I thought about was the Disney movie way back in the 90s, Iron Will, that was filmed right there in supposedly in the Twin Cities there. I was thinking about that race when you guys told me about that turnout. What are your thoughts on that? Were you guys trying to recreate that old-timey winter carnival type atmosphere?
I love that you brought that up because here's the deal. After I kind of had this idea, I had a conversation with my parents who were sprint racers in the 80s, and they have lots of friends who they raced with back then, and they mentioned this idea of a race to a friend. And they said, oh, yeah, I raced in Excelsior in the 70s. And I was like, what? So I started doing some digging, and I found out that this whole idea of a sled dog race on Lake Minnetonka was not a new idea, but had actually happened before in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 70s, and as far back as 1937 when Excelsior held a dog derby as part of its Klondike Day Winter Carnival. So that is what inspired our Klondike Dog Derby name. And that does stem from a winter carnival that was actually part of a series of winter carnivals that included the St. Paul Winter Carnival, which is exactly what you see in that Iron Will film. So the history of the race is deep, and that is a huge part of why the support from the community was so immense. I mean, one of our slogans was we're bringing a piece of history back to the lake. I mean, this is Lake Minnetonka. If you don't know anything about it, it is probably the wealthiest demographic, not just in the state, but in the region. The most expensive home in Minnesota, which is, I think it sold last year for between $15 and $16 million, is on Lake Minnetonka. So these guys got a tour of mansions, literally, on the run around the lake. So there's a lot of wealth here. There's a lot of old families who have been on the lake since the 1800s. And so by tapping into that history for the area, we really garnered a lot of support. And I think that is partly what, enabled us to, we had a pretty decent sized purse. It was a $25,000 purse. And for a 40-mile race, that's a pretty nice little, chunk of change. First place got $7,000. And, it's partly because of where we are. And like I said, tapping into the history, we just had immediate rapport with the community.
So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company. And now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/Teamaneke.
Jake, if you could speak on sort of the mushing side of things in Minnesota. I know that you're heavily involved in the tour business and that operation with mushing, but you're also involved in the mid-distance type of mushing, in particular with the bear grease. You've helped folks out there. You've loaned dogs. You've done just about everything there in the bear grease. How does mushing stand right now in the upper Midwest there, in Minnesota in particular, of course, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and so on?
Things are looking really good. The numbers are holding steady, if not climbing. There's a lot of excitement. Seems like, every year things are getting more exciting. There's bigger and better things happening all the time, and so it's all good. There's a lot of excitement all over. So yeah, I'm involved with the tour operation, but I do get myself involved in a lot of the races as well, because we operate a retirement kennel for racing dogs, retired racing dogs that do that for first half of their life or more, and then come hang out with us in their older years and just do a bunch of half-day trips. And it works out great to build relationships with different mushers that are here, and we are working to figure out the best situation for each dog all the time. And so if people think that's a good opportunity for their older dog, or if they think it'll be a good fit, then they're welcome to come here. And but yeah, so the racing scene around here has been pretty awesome, and this Klondike is just kind of, it came up all of a sudden here, and it's been amazing. There's so much excitement, and but yeah, with the bear grease, we had a great bear grease run. I just help out and kind of commentate, do some of the stuff with the online stuff, and I help out where I can. And I was helping with Nathan Schroeder, handling for him, and I don't know, I just love working with the dogs. The dogs never run out of things to teach us, and we get to keep learning from that.
So back to Bethany, you had talked about the planning for this started back a little bit ways back. Of course, this is not something you can throw together in a weekend. And one of the things that's most important to mushers, especially in the sprint side of it, is the size of the purse. Often you'll hear, I can't go to that race unless there's, X number of dollars in the purse. You had said that there's quite a bit of support for this race. It was in a wealthy area. It was in an urban area. Aside from the purse, what were some of the logistical challenges to make sure that you got to the starting line on time?
So when we first started planning the race, our goal was to do it in 2019. We thought we could pull this together in a year, and after about 6 months of planning, we realized there was no way that was going to happen. So then we extended that out to 2020 as being our inaugural year. I would say some of the big hurdles, besides the obvious, yes, raising money takes time. And we had to raise, we ended up raising about $125,000 for operating expenses, plus another approximately $75,000 in in-kind contributions, people donating services. So it was a lot to raise to pull this off. And part of the reason our budget is so large is because of being in an urban area and things like expenses of police, public safety, permits. I mean, the list goes on and on. But some of the big hurdles for us were we have a downtown start, which is not unique. Other races have that. But, I had to go to city council meetings and show pictures of races like the Copper Dog and the UP 200 and the Iditarod and Can-Am and say, hey, this is what it would look like if we close our street and fill it with snow and send sled dog teams down it. A lot of these people had never seen anything like that, never heard of anything like that. So there was a lot of pitching and, hey, can you imagine with us what it might be like? We also had to work very closely with Hennepin County Water Patrol. They patrol the lake, which is a public domain, but we still had to have a permit for our event. So again, permitting, pitching an idea and kind of getting that buy-in, and then not just the buy-in, but Water Patrol backed us in an incredible way on race weekend. I think I heard that they had at least 40 or 50 deputies out on the lake patrolling for safety, making sure that the teams were, not that there were no, because vehicles can drive out on the lake, making sure no vehicles were interrupting the course, being out there with, medics and things like that in case anything were to happen and anyone was injured. They were just credible to work with. Obviously, there was the recruiting of mushers, and that is an area where I'm very lucky to still be well connected in the community. So the team that I built is a team that the mushers know and trust. So one of the first people that I talked to was Dr. Jackie Pipcorn, who is a well-known sled dog veterinarian. She has been doing sled dog veterinary work for close to 30 years and has done pretty much every race from the Can-Am to Iditarod and everything in between. She is right in our backyard. She's in the Mound area, which is just across the lake from Excelsior. So she came on board and pulled her veterinary team so these mushers know and trust this name. I, of course, called my dad and said, hey, Dad, you want to add another race to your list of races that you marshal? And then he was able to pull judges. So we had a lot of the crew that's over at Bear Grease. And then I went to some races last year and I started talking to mushers and kind of pitching, hey, I'm going to throw together a new race. A lot of these are, people that I grew up with. Like I raced against them or my dad did growing up. Obviously pulling Jake in, again, it's those names and people that people trust. So they're not, mushers are not coming to a race blind like, okay, we hope these fools can pull something off. Instead, it was, it's all their colleagues, it's all their friends, and they got to the race and they were welcomed by people that they knew. And that was a huge part of making a race happen. Obviously, we can't have something without sled dog teams. So.
Yeah, and that sort of takes me down the next line of questions, Bethany, if I could. A lot of times races are organized by clubs, dog mushing clubs or that sort of thing. What was your guys' sort of basis for that? Was it just a group of folks that had an interest, or did you have that club affiliation that had been doing this type of thing for years? It started out as just a group of friends. Yeah, I mean, it was a couple people that I called. There were 4 of us, I think, in the room when we started. Myself,
Dr. Jackie, and then she grabbed a colleague, Dr. Shane Smith, who grew up in Alaska, grew up close to the Iditarod, and also does sled dog veterinary work. And then my friend Bill Damberg, who's a retailer in Excelsior, knows events well, knows the community well. And we started brainstorming, and it's the kind of thing where everybody kind of grabs a friend, and pretty soon our group is growing, and eventually we decide we should become a 501c3, and we form our nonprofit. And the board grew in size and in skill. We have some incredible board members. I mean, everyone truly brings a unique skill set, everything from a guy who is our media rep, Dale Kirshner. You know, he has worked in the media for years and just had all these connections, and we got, you know, sponsorship from Care 11, which is our local TV station, and articles in our, you know, front page article in the Star Tribune, and he's doing that kind of placement. We have this really, you know, just talented group of people. I could go through everybody. I won't do that, but truly everybody brought this skill set. So we just kind of went at it and formed a team, and when another person seemed like they were the right fit, they joined, and, you know, we worked hard. We are a working board, so we're not just a sitting board. We work very hard. We are the organization that made it happen. And then there was actually a pretty small number of committed volunteers who worked over the course of the 2 years, literally into probably, you know, thousands of hours. And then on race weekend alone, we had 500 volunteers who worked what we estimate as 1,800 human hours to make the race happen.
Wow, that's a lot. Because, you know, no race on any scale, whether it's distance races or a fun run or a sprint race, can be pulled off without a huge cadre of volunteers. That's for sure. So my next question is more to set the stage for our listeners. Most of our listeners are not mushers; they're just strictly fans. And one of the biggest challenges with races is finding an open weekend. And especially on a sprint circuit, those are very few and far between, because most people, you know, they have their races lined out from whether it started in December or January, and they're lined out through March. How difficult was it to find that open weekend where you could get the folks to come and commit to doing your race, and of course being able to put that event on that particular weekend without interfering with anything else in the circuit, whether it be, you know, Wisconsin or even further away, like you know, Montana, Colorado, or wherever, if people were coming from farther away?
Well, one thing we didn't realize is that this year was a year with 5 weekends in February, which doesn't happen. I think someone said the next one is in 50 years or something. So we kind of got lucky in the sense of how things lined up with the other races, with Bear Grease, and then there's the Apostle Islands race, our race, UP 200, Wolf Track, and Copper Dog. So we're looking primarily at races in our region. We weren't really looking at the sprint races in Canada. We weren't looking at what was happening. You know, I know there's the stage stop and things like that. We were looking at our region. That was kind of our primary focus in terms of mushers that we were trying to recruit. We did end up pulling, we got actually our first place, Dave Huckman came from Manitoba, and James Wheeler came down from Alaska. So we did pull beyond our region, but our main focus was just our local races. And we do work closely with their race directors to, you know, talk out like, hey, you know, I mean, that's what we're doing now, I should say. Talk out next year and work on some dates and make sure that we are working together for the benefit of the mushers, because ultimately that's what we all want. We want this, you know, the awareness of the sport to grow. We want to better the sport in the region, and so that's where we work together. You know, Copper Dog, they were telling us that 8 years ago they talked to UP 200 and said, hey, can you move back a weekend, because we want to have this sled dog race and we want the dogs to be able to rest in between. So that's kind of what's happening now as we work to plan our season for next year.
Excellent. And if we could go to Jake now, we're just about out of time, and I definitely want to talk about this because you had said that you were involved with the social media side of the Bear Grease, and you had talked about Blair Braverman and her being a part of the Klondike Sled Dog Derby. what do you think about all of the hubbub with social media lately, in particular with the Q-Pause thing going on with Iditarod and Bear Grease and other races, and just the amount of social media that's happening on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere? Can you sort of speak about the state of mushing on a social media perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things going on nowadays. There's so many different ways to be connected, and so it's a great time for fans to kind of be able to get involved a lot easier. Mushing has always been a hard thing for fans to get involved with because it's just hard to kind of learn about it all without being there, being a musher or whatever, and learning from mushers. But now it's easier to see it and live it and be with them, as if you were there, because you can see it on social media. So there's been, a lot of good stuff coming out lately. There's different ways of staying involved and different ways of people getting to follow their different teams that they want to follow and be a fan of certain teams. So yeah, there's been a lot going on. The Q-Pause was a lot of fun to have them at Bear Grease. They did a really good job talking about it all. I mean, they're used to dealing with the Iditarod, so this was a little out of their element. But they still had a very good turnout and had a good show that they put on. And then I was working with Blair at the race, Blair Braverman. We were commentating in front of the whole big crowd of thousands of people in Excelsior there, and she, she's got a huge social media following on Twitter, and so it's just kind of neat. I was walking around the crowd with her lead dog Peppy, who I didn't realize was as famous as she is, and people are like, "Is that Peppy?" There's people that follow on social media nowadays because it's so easy to, and can get a good idea what's going on. And another thing that was cool with all the new fans that we were kind of creating out there, and people are kind of falling in love with what we do. We a couple of times throughout the race, once at the finish, that we asked the crowd how many people have never been to a dog sled event before, and most of the crowd raises their hands, and then everyone starts cheering, and it was just awesome. So a lot of fun, a lot of excitement.
And that is going to be my final, but it's also a follow-up question to both of you guys. And we're going to start off with Bethany. Bethany, you said that a race of some form that is related to the Klondike race goes way back to the 30s. And the question to you is, and Jake can follow up after you, is what do you envision mushing looking like from a fan's perspective in the next 5 or 10 years? You had said that it was a huge deal to have so many people there, and of course Jake spoke about social media. What do you guys envision seeing in the next decade or two with how folks can interact and be a part of the sport of dog sledding?
Well, I think if this weekend was any indication, I mean, our community is hooked. Like, I run into people and they cannot stop talking about the race and the mushers and the dogs and da-da-da-da-da. So we foresee the fans of the Klondike becoming fans of the sport and traveling. Our hope is that we encourage, go up to Bear Grease next year, go up to Wolf Track next weekend, head over to Michigan and see, these races that are easily accessible. Yeah, they're, maybe 4, 5, 6 hour drive. I envision that these mushers are going to become more of celebrity figures in the minds of fans. You hear, like Jake talked about Blair, right? And her lead dog is famous. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of that, where the fans are going to become kind of enamored with different teams. They're going to start to, pick their favorites. Who are they cheering for? I just think it's going to take that sort of that path of, professional sports, right? We see that with, football and other sports where they're going to become kind of their own all-stars, I think.
I think so too. And Jake, before you answer, can you speak about what do you think would happen in the world of technology with following racing? And I ask you that because I've seen on your page over the years drone footage and that sort of thing that you've done with your dogs and with your tours and that. Do you think that that's a possibility, in particular with sprint mushing, where they could have, it'd be more like watching the cross-country events in the Olympics or something like that? Do you think that's a possibility in the future?
I do. I'm not necessarily a very techy kind of guy. I mostly just use my phone for just about everything. My brother does the drone stuff, and there's different things like that. But there's so many ways to do different things, and I think there's a lot of ways we can move it on to the next step. It does take some money, though. I mean, you got to put the effort into it, and so I think that there's a lot of things that sponsors can help with and to be able to get it to the next step. But there's a lot of different opportunities to do different things with drones and with different options. But yeah.
Excellent. Bethany, I believe you said already, but I just want to clarify, is this an event that's hopefully going to be a yearly event starting again in 2021?
Yep, that is the plan.
Last point here, then, of course, if you want to thank anybody in particular to end the show, sponsors or, anybody that deserves a heck of a lot of thanks here on a public forum, how can folks follow along? Of course, now that the event is over for this year, how can folks follow along to build up that momentum for next year?
Yes, I would say follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Our website is loaded up with information. We're adding galleries. And we also have several events throughout the year. So our next event is on May 29th. It's at a brewery in Excelsior. And we have probably 4 different events that happen throughout the year. Last year we brought in Brent Sass, and he came and spoke. He's from our area, so that was really fun. So I would say, follow us, stay up to date on what's happening. And there's a lot of really fun ways that people can be involved throughout the year too.
So Facebook, Instagram, and other social media, as well as your website. And Jake, put a plug in for your website or your social media for the tour business.
Okay, well, we are Chili Dog Sled Dog Trips in Ely, Minnesota, and that's what we do. We do short trips, we do half-day trips. I'm gonna say real quick, the Peppy, Blair's leader, is hanging out with us right now. I just had her out today. And but yeah, people are coming up to us like we didn't know that they were fans or whatever. But is Peppy here? Yep. So it's kind of funny to see that you were talking about how big the fan base is getting and stuff. So yeah, Peppy is famous.
For sure. I see the pictures and the stuff on Twitter all the time. Guys, thanks a lot for being on today. We're talking to Bethany Hway and Jake Hway. They're calling in from Minnesota to talk about the Klondike Sled Dog Race that just happened here not too long ago and will be happening again in 2021. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll keep in touch, okay?
Thanks you so much for having us.
Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you. On behalf of my guest today, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio. Did you know that Alaska Dogworks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.